Welcome to Moving Forward, sponsored by MPW Mocklink TV and Mocklink Internet, online at mpw.org. Each weekday morning, our local talk segment brings you the people who are helping move our community forward. Let's start the show.
Thanks for tuning in with us here for Moving Forward on this Wednesday. It's great to have you. We're very excited to be back once again. It's all brought to you by Muscatine Power and Water. Right now, turn it on for $10 off. Right now, when you turn on Mocklink Internet, TV, and or phone services, you can get $10 off each for 3 months. That's a $90 saving on 3 services for 3 months. Details at mpw.org. Again, I'm Jordan Davis. I'm joined by Kelly Brees this morning from Frontier Futures. How are you this morning, Kelly?
I'm just fine, Jordan. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Well, we are very excited to have you in because, you and I talked on this phone last week. I don't even remember what day it was, but you and I spoke for a couple minutes on the phone, and it's really interesting what you do. And I actually had you sit down and explain to me a little bit about futures because that's not really in my realm of understanding right now. So it was really interesting, some of the stuff that you told me just a few minutes ago. But I kind of wanted to start with a meet and greet. We talked very, very briefly on the phone last week. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you've been leading up to where you are now.
I grew up in the grain elevator business down in southern Iowa and kind of expanded that after we got out of that business as a family. And I went to work out in Columbus, Ohio. I've worked up in the northwest Iowa area, both as a cash grain merchandiser for several years, and now I've moved those talents over into the brokerage world. Just lately, back in November, I joined Frontier Futures out of Cedar Rapids, and they've kind of created a presence down in this area by having the addition of Kelly down here, and I'm very excited to see what we can do down in this area.
That's exciting. And now, which you work for, can you kind of give us a broad range of where it is all that you work?
Basically, I'm going to cover everything kind of south of Interstate 80, okay, down and into Illinois if need be, and just wherever producers down here see a need for some help in the pricing of the grain and the livestock that they produce.
Gotcha. So for those of us that don't know exactly what futures are, or the implicit details for futures, tell us a little bit about exactly what it is. Because I know a lot of farmers, they're listening to this going, well, futures are, and but for those of us that a little bit on the lower end of the spectrum for understanding it, just give us a quick overview.
What futures contracts do is kind of set a standardized price that we can all, as grain buyers and sellers across the country, we can base our prices that we pay both today and for months out forward off of those futures contracts that they trade at the Board of Trade. And that gives us a base price to start with, and then each individual cash buyer is going to have what we call a basis level in the business between those Chicago values and what his local grain is worth. And that is what establishes your basis, and that's made up of transportation, interest, and what have you.
That's interesting. And, it's such an interesting world that farmers live in when it comes to this ag trading and, selling their grain and all that kind of stuff, because it fluctuates constantly, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, especially with the establishment of overnight trading and what have you. And that price discovery process that we always talk about with grain futures becomes an almost 24-hour-a-day business. And it's very important that farmers stay on top of how those fluctuations are moving, and the different tools that the Board of Trade and brokers like myself can offer.
Interesting. Now, what is all that you offer? Are you like an information source? Are you kind of help them design their own plan for facing futures?
Exactly. We will help them design what we call a marketing plan at Frontier, and we'll help them figure out approximately what kind of yields and production that they're going to have to be pricing over the next few months. And then we'll help them create a plan rather than just by the whim of the market. We'll sit down and create a plan for them. It has certain price triggers and timing triggers that say, okay, if we hit a certain level by this date, we're going to sell X percent of our production.
Interesting. Now that makes me think. So it's like, if you sit down with a farmer, you're going to go over, all right, you have this much yield, you're expecting this much yield. If it's at this price on this date, this is what you need to sell it at. Something like that?
We'll help them establish what we call a break-even price. A lot of farmers have trouble in the past because of the variance in the costs of production, both the inputs and then the yield creates a tremendous variance between what their actual cost per bushel is going to be. We'll help them establish that.
Okay.
Just as GM can't sell a car without knowing what it cost them to make them,
Right.
farmers can't go out and really effectively market their grain unless they know what it cost them to produce.
I see, and that's where you come in.
And then once we get that price established, we know where their break-even point is, and we can help them establish some profitable futures levels, hopefully, in the future.
I see. That's very interesting. You know, the world of ag is it's something we like to dive into here at KWPC because we are very ag-oriented. You know, we've got our great farm shows that play during our midday, brownfield and stuff such as that. We love to hear about that. Folks have really tuned in for that here in this area. So I'm sure that a lot of folks are going to be able to take advantage of the services that you offer. So that's really awesome. Now, I know that you brought in a lot of information. I want to give you plenty of time to go through that. So what all are we looking at right now in futures and I just had it. You just said it up in Chicago, the Board of Trade.
There you go.
There, I got it.
What the two main items that we've been watching here lately, number one has been the March 29th planted acres or expected, what we call planting expectations report. And those numbers were just released. We're looking at about 92.8 million acres of corn and about 84.6 million acres of beans, along with the other wheat and so forth. Since we don't grow a lot of wheat in this area, we'll concentrate on those two commodities. Those two numbers, I don't think really shocked the market that much. We saw a little bit of reaction, as we always do. The big thing I think going forward is with the Midwest flooding we have and what have you, are those numbers going to change? Very, very likely. Will we shift to some of those corn acres to beans or vice versa? Probably not so much switching back to corn, but we could see those numbers fluctuate. I think we need to stay on top of that so we know how to price.
I see. And you know, this is my first time experiencing flooding like this. I've lived along the river, but only one other time. I lived down in Hannibal, Missouri. So flooding is, you know, it's something that farmers and folks that live along the river have dealt with for their entire lives. But you know, when it comes to like record flood levels like we might see here in these coming weeks and months, it's a totally different ball game, I'm sure, and especially when it comes for you guys to be pricing stuff, because you don't know, you know, what field's going to flood, where are we not going to be able to pull yield from, stuff like that.
Exactly. We don't know how many of these flooded acres are going to end up being what we call preventative planted acres, where we just can't get anything planted on them. How many of those acres are going to switch from what had been corn production, given beans having a shorter growing season? Now maybe we may have to shift some of those acres to corn, or we may not plant them at all. And so those are some numbers I'm really watching closely here over the next couple of months.
I gotcha. Okay, that's really interesting because it's just such a strange world for the ag futures. It seems like, you know, it's I'm sure that there's a lot of change, but are there any things that stay constant in the world of ag?
Well, in the world of ag, we have, I think, one constant is what we call seasonals. We generally see a bit of a price peak in the spring. That is when we have the most uncertainty about the size of the crops going forward and the demand for those crops as we go forward. So that lack of knowledge about what is to come creates a little bit of a pricing opportunity. Futures tend to show a little bit of a peak. I've always said that, you know, April, May is a very prime time for producers to be looking out at getting some forward contracting on what they can estimate as their production for this coming year.
I see. So, you know, I'm sure it's kind of stressful too for farmers to have to be looking at these numbers and going, all right, well, you know, maybe even they had to mix a new tractor or a new combine into the mix this year for that for just to get the job done. So, how do you work with farmers to kind of ease that their anxiety about trying to meet that goal?
Well, one of the primary tools that I use personally is what we call futures options. And they are, an option contract is kind of a derivative of a futures contract. It gives you the right to buy or sell futures at a given month at a given price if you want to, but it's not an obligation. And the use of those options can give farmers a little bit of peace of mind. They can buy a put option, which helps them to control downside risk, or they can go ahead and make a cash sale and use a call option over the top of that to control that, hey, maybe I didn't sell things too cheap. I've got this call in my pocket now, And if this thing wants to rally off of weather or export concerns or whatever, I can participate with that.
That's so interesting. Well, Kelly, you are just a wealth of information here this morning. I
thank you.
really appreciate you coming in and sharing all this with us. Was there anything else you wanted to mention while we were here? I'll open up the floor for you, but then I wanted to make sure that folks know how to get in contact with you too.
I think one of the primary things, like I said, we've got to watch here of late is going to be this planting situation as far as how many acres we actually get in the ground and what that's going to mean for us going forward. I think that is really going to be the primary issue for the next 30 to 60 days. Then we'll start to look at growing season weather and what have you. But that is really the primary thing I think we need to worry about right now.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, so how can folks get in contact with you if they want to reach out, maybe start setting up some futures?
My office number, they can reach me at 800-777-2438. That's up at the Frontier office in Cedar Rapids. Or my personal cell phone number, 785-713-9815. And don't be afraid to use that second one either, because that's what we do. That's what we're here for.
That's awesome. Well, Kelly, I really appreciate you coming in this morning, taking the chance to speak with us again. Our conversation last week. Oh, your meeting. How did your meeting go last week?
Meeting went pretty well. We would like to have seen a few more folks in attendance, but I think if we had filled the room, I probably would have still liked to seen a few more people there, given the uncertainty that we have in the markets today. And I think the kind of perilous nature that we're going to be experiencing price-wise in the next few months.
I got you. Well, so folks, right now, you really ought to take advantage of Kelly's services because, especially with the uncertainty that he talks about, how nice is it to have somebody that, keeps such a close eye on the markets, keeps such a close eye on all of this, all the futures, everything like that. He's going to be a great source for you to come to. So that's awesome.
I'm local right here in this area, so take advantage of that as well. You won't be talking to some guy from Chicago or New York that you've never met before. I'll be more than happy to come out and meet you one-on-one.
That's awesome. Well, thanks again, Kelly. Really appreciate you coming in. Kelly Brees joining us from Frontier Futures this morning. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
I'm Jordan Davis. Thanks for tuning in here to Moving Forward and reminding you that this is all brought to you by Muscatine Power and Water. If you're not hooked up to Mocklink Internet, TV, or phone services, turn it on for $10 off. Turn on one or more and get $10 off each for 3 months. Save even more when you bundle 2 or more. Details at mpw.org. Again, I'm Jordan Davis. Thanks for tuning in for Moving Forward here on KWPC and the Voice of Muscatine.com.
This has been Moving Forward on KWPC, AM 860, FM 95.1, the voice of Muscatine. Moving Forward is brought to you by MPW Digital TV and Mocklink Internet, a designated Blue Zones worksite. Browse to mpw.org. And remember, Moving Forward, local guests making good things happen in the community. Weekdays at 8:15.